Hey, good morning, criminal justice practitioners. Dr. Guidry here. And just kind of want to go over two things when it comes to the foundations of criminal law. Well, probably I'm going to go over more than two things. How about that? Because something just kind of buzzed through my brain. But let's look at this first. Number one, the basics of criminal law. Whenever you look at the criminal revised statutes, there's something that's called substantive law or criminal law. And what happens in there is when we want to charge someone for a crime as police officers, we have to look at that substantive or that criminal law. And that tells us, what the law is, what's needed to charge someone with that particular crime. And somewhere in there, it may have what the possible sanction is for an individual who is ultimately found guilty of that particular crime. Now, on the same sentence or in the same scenario, brackets, whatever you want to call it, individuals that we charge with a crime, especially on the law enforcement end, we consider them factually guilty. However, there's something that's called legal guilt. Just because we charge someone with a crime, we have factual information that says that individual did that particular crime. However, we need to ensure that individual is legally guilty. And so that's where criminal procedure comes in, or one's due process, however you want to articulate that. And that just says in that criminal procedure law is these are the rules you have to follow to ensure that someone you claim is factually guilty based off the evidence gathered is also legally guilty once it's presented to a possible juror or jury or a bench trial, or ultimately the person, which in most cases does happen, the person pleads guilty to the particular charges. And even with that, when someone takes a plea deal, there's still some procedures we have to follow. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands how that actually works in kind of a nutshell. Those two types of laws that we look at, the criminal law, substantive law, and the procedural law / due process. Those are the things we have to look at when we're processing someone through the criminal justice system. So what ultimately happens when someone is charged with a very serious crime, right? Well, fortunately, in the United States, we have what's called an adversarial system. So what that means, if I'm the state, I have plenty of opportunity to present my evidence to the individual or to the court, the jury, whatever the case may be. However, the defense, whoever's representing that defendant, also has the opportunity to present evidence on their own behalf to counter mine if I'm the state, if I'm the one that's representing the state at that point. So that's where where both of us, both the defense and the prosecution, go before a judge or go before a jury and say, look, this is what we have, and this is why you should find our person, if we're the state, that person guilty. Or if we're the defense, this is why you, the jury, or you, the judge in a bench trial, should find the person not guilty, okay? So now, of course, when it is time to reach a verdict or to find someone guilty, what is the burden of proof? And I think many of you know that because you watch a bunch of TV shows. So the burden of proof is that when we present evidence as the state, the burden of proof is on us. The defense ain't got to prove crap at the end of the day. But we do, as the prosecutors or the district attorney's office or the state. So we have to come in there and present evidence to a jury or a bench trial, whatever that is. And we have to be able to show that this person, based off of the evidence presented, is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And so that sometimes can be very difficult. And so we want to make sure that when we present that evidence, that when the jury sees it, reviews it, analyzes it, whatever, that they find the individual guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So what happens if the individual or one of the jurors or two of the jurors or all of the jurors say, or even the judge, if it's a bench trial, says, hey, you know what, state, you really haven't proven your case, and I have some doubt about that. At that point, your obligation as a citizen of the United States is to say, you know what, the state hasn't proved beyond a reasonable doubt that this person is indeed guilty based off of the evidence presented. At that point, you would want to say, this person is basically not guilty, okay? Or we just can't convict this person because the evidence doesn't show that, okay? So always be careful with that, be cautious with that. If in doubt, then at that point you can't get a conviction. Now, I want to make something perfectly clear right now. Just because someone is found not guilty, does that mean that they're actually innocent? No, that doesn't mean that. I mean, we could go on all day long about O.J. Simpson, Casey Anthony, and whoever else you can think of, right? Because in my mind, I feel they were guilty. However, the state didn't do a very good job at presenting the evidence, and they were ultimately found not guilty. Does that mean they're innocent? Not necessarily. But I also want to caution you on something else as well. There are individuals in our society that unfortunately get caught up in the criminal justice system that are actually found guilty, only to find out years, decades later that they were quite likely innocent. Okay, so just be careful with that. If this is the line of work you want to do, you want to make sure that when you analyze evidence, when you're the police officer and you gather evidence to factually charge someone with a crime, you want to make sure in your mind as a police officer, you want to think like a district attorney, right? You want to be able to say that, you know what, based off of what I have, I think that if I presented this at this point in time, that this individual would be guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the mindset I need you to have if you're going to work in the system, because ultimately you, the police officer, are going to pass on that intel to the district attorney's office, who's going to analyze it at that point. And in their mind, they have to look at the evidence you gave them, and they have to ask themselves, is this enough evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this person did indeed commit this crime, and that we can find them not only factually guilty, but legally guilty as well. All right, so hopefully that helps. And keep your chin up. Working in the criminal justice system is not easy. It's very labor intense. But remember, we're dealing with people. And number one, we want to hold people accountable. But number two, we want to make sure when we do hold people accountable that they are afforded their due process. And more importantly, they are given the opportunity of justice. Thank you and have a great day.